It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back to it. It is your feel-good breakfast show, Expresso. We're live on SABC3. It's that time of the morning where we dip into another edition of our feature where we focus on the unconventional side of the law. And the law can be quite tricky, so we ask the question, so now what? And we're calling once again upon the legal guidance of our friend and expert in law, Director at Legalese.co.za. It's Eitan Stern. Of course, right along with the grown-ups who are grappling with the new normal of COVID-19 era. This is an important conversation that we need to be dipping into. But Eitan, good morning.
Good morning. Sorry I'm not with you in studio today.
Ah, man, we miss your presence here. We miss your presence so much. But it's good to be able to connect with you in this way.
Yeah, for sure.
Eitan, you know, we know that it's very difficult to hold anyone else liable if you are to catch COVID-19 during this time. But does this then change in any way when it comes to catching it in the school environment?
All right, so school's a very interesting one with COVID. So not really. COVID is a tough disease and it's unfortunately very contagious. And we're all trying to figure out ways to live with it and carry on our lives. And one of those realities is that children need to go back to school. So children are going back to some extent, they're going at their own risk. And parents need to understand that there's some element of risk attached to this. So how does it work? Well, schools do have to comply with a specific set of safety standards that's been set out by the Department of Education, and schools will be closed if they can't comply with those standards. In theory, if a school didn't comply and someone got sick, then they could be liable in the same way that any person or institution can be liable if they cause harm when they break the rules. But it would need to be proven that the child or the person caught the illness at the school, which can be tough. So to manage this risk, many schools are asking parents to sign indemnities to show that the parents understand the risk of sending their child back to school. And they are, of course, keeping to the safety procedures prescribed by government. But in general, I think we should all go gently. It's a tough job to do anything in this pandemic. I say sitting here in my lounge instead of in studio. And I'm sure it's especially tough to run a school. So while the safety procedures may not be perfect, nothing is really perfect during this pandemic.
And I think that introduction sets the tone pretty well and really broadly for this conversation that we're having, which really has to do with learners and parents and the choices, the legal choices specifically that they do have around education in the times of COVID-19. But Eitan, many people, of course, are considering the option of then not continuing the school year and picking it up from the same grade next year. So many having those conversations right now. Can parents and learners legally do this? Can they make that choice legally?
Yeah, okay, cool. So the department, what they did is they put together a schedule for how kids will return to school. Each grade is going back at a different time, and I believe you guys are talking about this more on the show, which is great. But what did the rules say is that parents actually have the option to not send their send their kids back to school if it's in the best interests of the child. So parents can't just decide not to send them to school because it's easier or they don't like school or anything like that. But if it's somehow in the best interest of the child, maybe the child's going to be homeschooled or they've got something else planned for the child, which, you know, that's young enough to miss a couple of months, then they could send it back. Then they could not send their child back to school until these lockdown procedures, lockdown regulations are over.
Eitan, what about parents who have paid their children's school fees for the year, understandably, have many questions regarding whether they can get partial refunds? What is the status regarding this, and can a parent then legally request this during these times as well?
Okay, cool. So I had a look through the regulations. As far as I could tell, there's nothing in the rules about this. So it would then have to be dealt with the school's terms and conditions, which a parent would sign when entering that child into the school. So presumably, since the school has not done anything wrong by being closed, and they would still have to cover their expenses, such as the teachers' salaries, one couldn't ask for their full fees back if one decides not to send their kid to school. But if a parent insists or they think the school's done something unfair, then they could firstly look towards the Consumer Protection Act, try to get some protection, or of course look at the school's terms and conditions, and there'll hopefully be something around there about refunds. which might give them some sort of a remedy.
And I know that for a lot of parents, I mean, they've still had kids learning online or virtually still receiving all of that homework.
Yeah.
So those are the things that you consider as well. I mean, we've paid school fees for my niece from the beginning of lockdown and continue to pay in full, purely because the teachers are still working and still need to get their salaries. But that's something to think about and to consider, of course, as you go through those school laws that you've got outlined for you in regards to fees. But then that's all then on the school's responsibility to make sure that they outline that. But what about the parents? Do parents have an obligation then when it comes to all of this?
Yes, certainly. So, this COVID's definitely a community disease. It's something we all have a responsibility around, and, our actions affect everyone else. So parents in the laws have an obligation not to send their child to school if he or she is sick or if they're experiencing symptoms of any sort. And if a parent is sick, their child is sick, they have to notify the school and not send their child to school. So it's really important that the parents and the schools play their part in this to make sure that we get through this, which it really seems that we are. And that's just an incredible thing to read the news each day and see how South Africa has tackled this thing so brilliantly, and we're hopefully getting through it.
But like you said, Eitan, this is a community thing. It's unprecedented. Everyone's going through it. And maybe we just need to be a little bit, just caring at this place and just be patient with everyone, because we're also trying to find out what works for us as parents and also for the children and the learners during this time.
Approach it all with love
100%.
and care and compassion at all levels of this interaction. But of course, Eitan Stern, you are fantastic. Thank you very much for joining us this morning and shedding light on what the choices are legally for parents and learners when it comes to going back to school and running education during this time.
Cool. See you next week.
Thank you very much, Eitan. Well, it's just gone past 7 o'clock. Time for us to find out what's happening in the news with Graham.